Thank you. And it's funny, like we transitioned from a completely online course to a offline course to a completely online course in a matter of 8 days at Southwestern University. So we are dealing with some of the same sort of learning curves and challenges you are. And it's been interesting. I've been so impressed at the resiliency of our students, our staff, and our faculty. And for me, most of my research is looking at sort of technological disruption in industry. So COVID-19 has been both scary and fascinating case study for me watching the implications it has for all different industries. Jim is very kind. I don't know what he's told you. Jim and Allison are like my heroes. What you don't know is we have students that intern at the chamber every single summer, and the mentorship they get at the chamber, the things they learn, the tangible projects that they work on are truly life changing. I mean, we have students who interned there 2 years ago, a year ago, and all of the connections they bring back to class are, I mean, just tremendous. So I will tell you, I'm a little intimidated and honored to present here today. I've participated in a lot of lunch and learns across different organizations. And the one thing I wanted to make sure is that after 30 minutes, you didn't leave it thinking, well, I spent all this time. Maybe I had spaghetti like Jim. Maybe I didn't even have lunch, but it was a waste of my time. So I'm hoping that I can give you not only some information that's helpful, but actually some tangible tools that you or people in your organization may be able to use. So that's the goal. I will share these slides and a different handout that I have with Allison so that if you want any of them, you can absolutely get it and have access to the resources. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. This is sort of the outline for today. I am a marketing professor. My research is in marketing. So everything that I do starts with who are you serving? So I met some amazing people in my breakout room. We have people providing printing services. We have people providing amazing dance classes. And Georgetown, you would probably have a lot of work to do with me if I took one of those, but there's physicians on this call. So thinking about who is the constituency that you serve, because that's sort of the beginning of any marketing strategy. And then how do you reach them in this time that's understandably very chaotic, not only for you, but from the consumer standpoint. I have a couple of case studies of organizations in the Central Texas area. So I am in Austin, and I'm pretty familiar with the Austin market. So highlighting some of those businesses that have been successful. And these are small to medium-sized businesses, not large enterprise organizations, but that have been able to do some pretty interesting things and use their user base as a marketing vehicle. And then some free online tools that may be useful for you, staff members in your organization. So that's kind of the flow for today. I think everybody's muted, but if you have questions, I'm pretty laid back. Like, please interrupt me or ask me, or I'm happy to answer them at the end. So I wanted to start with a couple of aggregate insights. There is so much information right now, so much information. And so sort of extracting some of the big patterns we see across consumer groups, I thought might be useful. And then I'll get into some more specific insights that researchers have found within like specific groups of consumers. So Nielsen is a huge marketing research organization based out of Chicago, Illinois. And they've been looking, so anytime you go to the grocery, they have the scanner panel families. They will scan what a sample of individuals across the country are buying in their grocery carts. They're the people that put the over-the-top boxes in certain families' TVs to track what are people watching. So they pull consumer data of all kinds, and they also track information from organizations across the country. And they use all this data and come up with, so what does this mean? So what they found is people and organizations are really in three mindsets right now. And I thought it was a clever way to sort of think about where people are in this COVID-19 environment. And it's rebound, reboot, and reinvent. Again, this is Nielsen's framework. It's what they have collected through their data. Rebound is the idea that things are getting better. And then by the third quarter of this year, we will see things go back a lot more towards what we remember as the old normal. Things will open up, people will be in person, maybe mask wearing won't be as prevalent. There are consumers and organizations in that group. Reboot is the idea that's cautiously optimistic. Well, we need to wait and see because we don't know a lot. We're relying on scientific data to still come in, and maybe it will take longer and it'll be the fourth quarter, and we'll see some changes in practice that aren't going to go back to the way things are. Reinvent is probably the most long-term view, and it's the idea that, nope, we need to wait longer. It's probably going to be 2021 before we see things adjust, but they will recalibrate. They will no longer go back to the same way. We will just have to adjust to the new normal. I think this is a useful framework because it's important for you to understand as an organization where you are, but also what mindset your consumers have. And they may, and I say consumers, but your constituency, we have nonprofits on this call, like the YMCA, like where are they and where is their comfort level? There are a couple of trends, and at Jim's at-home food delivery service is a great example of this. Homebody economy. This is a term the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times is using. You can see it on CNN. And it's the idea that a lot of our daily activities have moved to home. And so I wanted to focus on a couple of different categories. One is food. I like to eat. This is a lunch and learn. We see people cooking at home more. But with that, there has been some burnout. People are tired of cooking at home all the time. It requires cleaning dishes. If you have a family of 4 or larger, it's a lot of food that you have to prepare. So we see meal kits and other such meal delivery services picking up. Domino's has said that they're going to hire 10,000 more workers because restaurants that are predisposed to be delivery based and enjoyed at home are doing really well. We'll talk a little bit about restaurants and other places that are more experiential and have a dine-in option and how they are pivoting. What we also see is a focus on self-care, but what product categories are being affected have sort of shifted. Recently, the CFO of Unilever, so they're an Anglo-Dutch company. They own Dove, they own Ben and Jerry's ice cream brand. They analyzed their product categories and saw people were actually shampooing and using deodorant less. I don't know what that means for the hygiene in everyone's house right now, but they're not going out as much, so that makes sense. But they are spending more on self-care products like candles and like things that might help with mental health and anxiety. So there's been a shift in the kinds of products people are using. The other interesting thing, depending on what your industry sector you work in is, there's been a trade-off. Around Christmas, earlier in the year, we saw a lot of both federal and state regulation dealing with consumer privacy. There was a lot of media coverage of the Ring doorbell and how angry people were that the Ring doorbell tracked people and recorded video. We've seen a complete shift. People really aren't talking about consumer privacy concerns because they've traded off concerns about COVID with convenience at home. So you see huge reliance on things like Alexa, which is an artificial intelligence enabled assistant. People are shopping online. There's lots of people that before this didn't do the majority of their shopping online. There has been a shift just because of convenience and concerns around safety. The other big thing we see is this trade-off between clean and green. Starbucks probably started this when back in March they said you can no longer bring your coffee containers into Starbucks. Like they used to let you refill it there. Now it's all reusable products because people, again, their primary concern is health and safety. So for companies, so I think of Yeti down in Austin, that create containers that are meant to be reused and things, the messaging has to change to assure consumers that they can still be green and clean. And so that's been interesting. We see that in the restaurant business. So Jack Allen's, which has Salt Traders and the Jack Allen's restaurant in Round Rock, they are now doing paper menus that they print daily and that aren't used by different consumers. It's not more cost effective, certainly for them, but I think it gives consumers peace of mind that no one else is touching that piece of paper. The other thing that has been, I would say, a positive impact is you're seeing a lot of local pride. As people are indoors, they're spending their time inside doing help with their families. They still want to find a way to help the local community and economy. And that has been great because you see more of a consumer effort to look for information for, so how do I get a meal kit subscription that maybe helps Texas farmers? So that's been a really good change where you've seen communities come together. Before I move to the next slide, are there questions or things I can answer? At this point, I'm just sharing some, I know, aggregate data. So as a researcher, I'm always nervous about things that are in aggregate, right? Because that's across so many different groups. What's more important to me and probably to you is, well, how does my target constituency work? So YMCA of Williamson County probably has a target, families with ages and income levels of a certain level. If I have dance classes that I offer in Georgetown, there are probably a target segment. So understanding the differences among those segments is really important. And Forrester Research Group, which usually focuses on technology companies, has dived into more consumer-driven data collection during this time. And they published some things. This was in late March with a sample of about 500 online consumers across the country. And they found some pretty significant differences based on age, demographics, and geography. What they found was that younger consumers, so 18 through 24 bucket, were generally less worried about the long-term impacts of this pandemic. And this probably doesn't surprise you. And compared to total online adults, they were more likely to still go outside to do things. So not rely on delivery, not practice social distancing in as much, with as much rigor, I would say, as the other demographics. For 45 to 54, I would call them the cautiously optimistic group. Again, this is just based on the sample of Forrester data, but I think it reflects pretty true. They don't necessarily see long-term effects after a year, 2 years. They think things will reach another equilibrium. However, they're more cautious and still rely on delivery and practice social distancing. Where we see the pandemic really affecting mental health concerns is the over 65 population, who, I mean, have been deemed sort of the more sensitive group to be impacted by that. They are thinking about long-term impacts. How can they continue to practice safe social distancing and things? It's important to think about the different groups just because the constituency you serve may have a very different value set or reaction to what's going on in the current environment. There's also differences based on socioeconomic and income levels and geography. I didn't put a ton of detail on the slides, but one thing that's interesting is what we found was consumers who are below $25,000 income level for their families, they actually rely on the information provided to them by organizations, governmental units, and take that to be true. If the government says that it's okay to be at 25% capacity, or if organizations tell me that they are doing a good job sanitizing, then they usually trust that to be true. What we find in families where the household income is $150,000 or more annually is they do a little bit more due diligence. They spend on average an hour a day gathering information, just their own information, to see, does this seem true? How can I find different sources of information? This again has implications for behavior because someone's going to need a little bit more reassurance, whereas other family groups may take this to be true. And I didn't put this on the slide, but geographically, we see concern also kind of spread out. So California, Washington State, and New York, which were affected by COVID-19 probably the most early and had concentrated impacts of it, they have the most pessimistic view of how things are going to go and are probably likely to be in that reinvent category where they think a lot of things need to change. Probably not surprising, just because those are San Francisco, New York, like cities where people live in more proximate areas. You may not go live in the suburbs where it's possible to be socially distant from your neighbors. So I think where you are in the communities that you serve have some implications on your strategy. Questions about this at all? Zoom is so weird because in a classroom or if we're in setting, I can usually read the room and say, oh, everybody's so bored or everybody's interested. Zoom, I have to do my best to guess. So if things are not clear, if anything is not interesting, just let me know. So how do you market in a time like this? And as you can imagine, in a time of uncertainty, there's a lot of uncertainty about what is the right message and what is the appropriate message. So at the national level, as things began to shut down, as people began to work from home, you saw a lot of national brands like Starbucks, MasterCard redo their logos. So Starbucks covered the face of their iconic mermaid that they have in their little logo with a face mask. MasterCard disentangled the two circles that are usually together to show social distancing. More recently, Frito-Lay came out with a television ad campaign where they sort of mocked these brands and said it's really not about the brands. No one cares about you changing your logo. It's what you're doing at this time of crisis, and talked about the jobs they've created, their donation programs. This was actually met with some criticism because people argued you can talk about the good things you do without chastising other brands because you're also running a commercial. There's not one right answer, right? But if you look across it, I have a quote there from Jim Lawson, who's pretty well respected in the branding and advertising community. This is a time where brands can say, I'm going to stay out of people's way. They're dealing with a lot of financial uncertainty, health uncertainty, or they can take a leadership position where they really try to help people understand, how can I serve your need? How can I be sensitive to what you're doing, but also show you that I'm producing a product or delivering a service that can help you at this time when you are having a lot of different life changes. It's a good time for content marketing. I don't know if you've had other marketing speakers or how many of you are familiar with content marketing. I can ask, is that a term that's pretty familiar to a lot of you? I mean, it is, yes, okay. So I see Jim shaking his head. So I won't go into too much detail. Since it's a large room, I'll just define it briefly. Oh, I see a chat. So maybe it's, yes, okay. Somewhat to some people and familiar to a couple of people. So content marketing, the idea is that you are creating content that people, and so we have some experts in the room too. So hopefully you can jump in or absolutely add some detail. You create content that people are interested in going and reading or viewing, if it's visual content or a video. The goal is not necessarily to sell a product or sell a service, but it's to create brand affinity. Like, so you're getting people familiar about the brand, you're reminding them about the brand, and it's a good inbound marketing technique versus outbound. So rather than like a Facebook ad or a Google ad, where we consider that outbound because it sort of interrupts the consumer in the search or what they're doing, this is something that people will actively seek to go follow. So a lot of nonprofit organizations do this really well. Like, I know the Georgetown Project has great stories about kids at the Nest. And you want to keep going to their site and reading about it because you want to follow the trajectory of that child's life. So that's a great content marketing piece, because it's not that they're directly asking for donations. It's not that they're directly asking for volunteer hours, but it's a good content piece that drives people. So inbound to your site. Large scale organizations do this really well. So if any of you are familiar with the Dollar Shave Club, for those of you that aren't, it's a shave club that basically you get the blades for your razor once a month. It works out much cheaper than buying razors from Gillette or at the grocery store. When they first started, they were a small little startup with rather snarky videos on YouTube. Their founder would talk about it, and they were pretty funny. And people, I don't know, initially were that interested in the Dollar Shave Club, but they did find the YouTube videos funny. So people would go, they would share them, and then eventually they began to gain a lot of subscribers. Well, Unilever, who I alluded to earlier, which is like the P&G of Europe, actually bought them for $1 billion cash offering in 2016. $1 billion for little Dollar Shave Club. Part of that was they were a direct competitor to Gillette, but also the content that they created was gold. And Unilever really didn't have a brand like that. And again, in those videos, it's not a hard sell for the shavers, but it's definitely something that drove people to their site to want to engage with them. This may be a good time for content marketing because people are at home, they're online or out. So any stories you can tell, any experiences, just like this one that we're having, are things people are likely to engage in. Another one, completely off the cuff, but just funny, probably not PG for anyone under 13, is Hamburger Helper. Hamburger Helper wanted to reinvent their brand. So the little mixes of hamburger. In 2016, they launched something called Watch the Stove. It was a 5-song playlist on SoundCloud. It resonated with the teen college market who often relies on Hamburger Helper. I can attest to you this is true when they're trying to cook a quick dinner. But it was funny. Again, I say PG-13 and up because there's some language on there that's not PG, but a great campaign that really went viral. So rather than sort of give you some vague examples, I wanted to turn to a couple of companies that are doing things really well in the Austin area. So let me see. Here we go. One is called Farmhouse Delivery. So similar to Jim's Spaghetti, this is a delivery service. What they are known for is sourcing products from Texas ranches, Texas farms, Texas producers. So they were a pretty small operation. They had started to grow, but they have picked up. So I don't know if you can see on the slide, you'll notice due to high demand, they've temporarily suspended new orders. So COVID-19 has actually catapulted their growth in a very short amount of time. Part of that is consumer driven. People have been very worried about their access to fresh produce, meat, getting products. People want to do local good. So their whole brand message is that you can get the farm to your door from local farms. So not only are you eating healthful food, you're helping the local community, but they were really smart. They did a lot of PR work with local news agencies. They work with KView. Then they partnered with organizations like the Sustainable Food Center, Austin Culture Map, which covers like local Austin restaurants, things to do on the weekend. And they talked about farmhouse delivery. Like, are you worried about getting healthy food? Here's somewhere you can go, and you're helping Texas. So having that second piece really helped them has been really great. I didn't mean to do that. I was trying to go to the chat window to see. Okay, perfect. So that has been really helpful for them. They're also very active on social media marketing. So farmhouse deliveries target demographic tends to be, I would say, from the 20s to the early 40s, very active on Facebook and Instagram, these communities. And so they constantly post pictures of their rancher boxes, their produce boxes on Instagram. They have social media campaigns. They also have a very active email marketing campaign. So I was curious just because I read about them and they've been doing so well. And so I'm on their wait list. I'm not sure that I want to do it, but I'm curious about their marketing. They actively send emails to people on their wait list every 2 weeks. And it says, we haven't forgotten about you. We have so much demand. We're trying to figure out how to make our supply chain more efficient. But then they give me a story about one of their farmers they're working with. It keeps me engaged, it keeps me informed, and it lets me know as a potential consumer that they're still thinking about me. So really smart way to sort of build their business. I wanted to cover restaurants and wineries a little bit, just because in this group, and I think about the square, we have businesses like Mesquite Creek, we have Blue Corn Harvest, Monument Cafe, Lark and Owl. So thinking about things that have been really effective. So again, I think the places, and these are all small businesses that have been pretty successful during this time, have tapped into consumers' desire for a fun experience and the desire to help local. So they're definitely tapping into both, and they're thinking about strategic ways to mesh online and offline. So 2 quick examples. House Wine is a winery. I wanted to touch wineries because there's so many great wineries in the Georgetown area. They are in South Austin, and what they have done is created virtual wine tastings. So it's very much like what we're doing today, but you have like a 3-day window where you purchase wine, you pick it up, you go home, and then you log into a Zoom meeting at a certain time and do a tasting. So you could argue you could just sell the wine, but by adding the tasting feature on it, they're creating an interactive experience. People are at home, they want things to do. Not everyone feels comfortable going out yet. They're getting there. So they've sort of helped hit that middle spot, giving people an interactive experience while also enjoying their product. They've been a huge hit. They sell out probably every week. Crema Bakery is another small family-run bakery in the Austin area. They were really smart. I happen to know the owners, really incredibly nice people anyway, but they took this as an opportunity to think about what do communities need right now. So they kept their bakery operations because kids are still having birthday parties. It's like the one thing that's still normal in this crazy time. But they also started delivering groceries, and that was a helpful pivot for them. But they've launched partnerships with different nonprofits. So last week, they worked with a nonprofit in Austin that works with people dealing with mental health issues and concerns. And they created a series of cakes. So you can't see it, I'm sorry. It's a unicorn that's crying, or like a gray cloud, that draws awareness to mental health and tries to highlight the stigma against mental illness. And you could buy those cakes, and they were beautiful, and 50% went to the nonprofit. So what was strategic about that? And I'm not saying that's at all why they did it, because they're great people, but why it was a great partnership was they now expanded their base. They're a small bakery that runs very much on their proximate neighborhood that comes and buys it. But by partnering with this pretty large organization in Austin, they had people coming from all over that were NAMI's, which is the nonprofits donors, that wanted to support this bakery and got to try them. So really smart. They were very active on Facebook and Instagram in like promoting this and getting it out to people. Great visual elements that were put into all of the content. I saw today, just this morning, Lark and Owl Bookstore in Georgetown is doing a great event. So they sort of thought about what do people need right now, and what they used to do were a lot of author book tours and stops at Lark and Owl. That's not so easily possible, but they're hosting virtual events. So they have Marlo Thomas and Phil Donahue, who wrote a book about the successes of a long-term marriage, and they're going to do an author reading, and you can participate and you buy tickets through Eventbrite. That's a great way to sort of engage people. And if Phil Donahue and Marlo Thomas are some big names, so I'm very impressed. And it's a great way to keep that consumer base thinking about your company. So those are a couple of examples. I know we have nonprofits on here, so we need to make sure that I also hit the nonprofits. They have been amazing. So two that I just want to talk about really quickly. They're doing events. So usually these are either through Facebook or they can be on YouTube. And YouTube's great because you can start your own YouTube channel pretty easily and then store all these events. The Hill Country Conservancy did a virtual walk-in talk. So their executive director walked part of the trail, pointed out different wildlife, and you could participate. This was 2 Fridays ago. It was really interesting. They highlighted things, and then they launched their next big campaign. They engaged a lot of people. It was done through YouTube, and then I could go back later and participate if I had a work thing come up and couldn't participate live. But it's a smart way to keep people engaged. I'm gonna get this wrong. Austin Water Wildlife Conservation in Travis County, Balcones Canyonlands Preserve. So 2 organizations have created a series for parents, wildlife enthusiasts, everyone, called Our Wild Neighbors. The first series is actually tomorrow, and they sent me a Zoom link, and it's looking at bats in the hill country. The next one is bobcats. I think about all of these parents and kids at home, and what a great way to engage for 30 minutes and learn something interesting. I'm fascinated. I'm a huge animal person. I was like, I want to learn all about the bats. in the hill country. But it's smart ways to keep people engaged using technology. And then as capacity grows, so I think parks can be at what, 25% capacity now. They're slowly building up to 50%. They're keeping people interested and giving them things that they will do as more and more stuff opens. So hopefully 3 categories of companies that are interesting and helpful for you. I'm a big, like, so what are the takeaways? What do I do differently from this? I think the biggest thing all of these organizations did was they understood their target consumer and where they were at, whether they were willing to come to a wine event, whether they preferred something online. I have a friend who runs a business, and she was like, what if I don't know? I serve a lot of different people and I'm not sure. If you have an email listserv, or if you have a Facebook page, a great thing you might want to do is run a survey. I've had a couple of businesses do this, and I was really, really impressed. My gym did this actually. It was 5 questions, and they asked me, what are the things you're comfortable with? Like, are you willing to come in and have your temperature checked? Are you willing to wear gloves? We were talking about dancing lessons earlier. Are you comfortable with? And so that way you can get some aggregate data on what people are and aren't comfortable with, what their expectations were. And that might help how you reopen, what you communicate to them. Having disposable menus might be really important to part of your constituency base. So I think if you don't know, running a survey is always, it's great data anyway. You can find out, do you engage a lot on Facebook? Would you prefer emails from us? So something short, couple of questions, and then thinking about what channels they use. Georgetown is interesting because there is such a diverse community. Like, you have people that are in Sun City, in requirement communities who do a lot of things in Georgetown. And then you have a lot of new young families moving into town, and how they spend their time online might vary. So being sort of aware of where they look, it may not all be online. You have the great community impact newspaper. I think Melinda's still on your board of directors. She used to be there. I mean, I have seen some restaurants do some clever things where they put in a recipe for like their pie. I think of Monument, and then you can go buy the ingredients for the pie and follow along and make it. Mako's on the Creek is a great small restaurant in San Antonio that's been doing that a lot, where they have chef series. So their chef makes things from their restaurant. You can go buy the ingredients. They have like kits that they're selling and follow along with them and do it. It's a great way to engage. If you have great things that you're already doing, but you're not sure how to, that's awesome. I saw somebody sent out an 8-question survey, and it was helpful to see what new schedule was coming out. So I'm glad that that worked for you. I think that data is usually useful because often we guess what our consumers want or how comfortable they are, but actually hearing from them is useful. So that's really, really helpful to know. If you are already doing things and you're like, I'm already doing all these online events, people just don't know, then I suggest a good PR strategy where you get community impact, where you get the Williamson Center, where you get the Chamber of Commerce to maybe post about the great events you're doing. One thing that can be tricky is if there's not like a PR specialist at your company. And so this is where I wanted to have some tools for all of you, and I will send this to Allison. So there's a great company called HubSpot, and I'll talk about them in my last slide, and then I promise, I know I've been talking a long time, I'll stop. They have a press release template. If you have never, ever written a press release, they actually give you a template for here's one that newspapers, TV stations, any media outlet is used to seeing. They tell you like what to put in each section, how to format it. They also give you like a promotional to-do list. Like, so if you were handing this off to, let's say, a fabulous intern like Chloe or Ruben, you could tell them like who owns it, what is the timing of that promotional to-do list, and it even gives them some FAQs, like, I don't have a huge budget for visual content. Maybe I want to this to get posted. What should I do? It also gives them suggestions for thinking about where you might want to send your press releases. So if the day tripper has covered your restaurant once, it's likely he found it interesting. So if you set up a Google alert or a Twitter alert, anytime your restaurant is mentioned in the media, it'll actually send a message to your inbox. So I tell people to do this with caution. If you're like a huge organization like Disney, you wouldn't want every mention of Disney to come into your inbox. But if you're a small business, whenever you get a mention, that may be an author, a blog poster, or a newspaper that already likes your business. If you're doing something new, it makes sense to then resend it to them. So hopefully that's helpful. I will send this to Allison so that if any of you want it, you can see it. And then my last slide was just some free tools. I urge all of my students to this before they go to an internship. It's HubSpot Academy. So HubSpot creates software that a lot of large enterprise organizations use for like customer relationship management, their sales funnel, marketing. They manage it through their system and their software. What's nice is they're super helpful. They have HubSpot Academy where you can see there's all these classes. If I used terms like content marketing and inbound marketing, you're like, I've heard it, but I don't know. And maybe you're not the person on your team that handles that. They have these courses you can do online. And what's nice is there's certification courses. You can actually get certified in these different certifications and add them to your LinkedIn. The other thing you can do is take Google Digital Garage. It's like a space where Google has lots of different classes. You can take all 26 of the classes and get a certification, but it may be that you and your organization don't need that. But given how often people use Google and Google advertising, it's great ways, and I think especially now as we move more online, for people in your organization to get some skill sets or develop those skill sets without any upfront cost. So those are just two resources. And now I'll turn to questions. I see a question from Steve. What do you recommend for a business that's travel that is constantly changing, sometimes hourly? That's a great question. So online has that double-edged sword, right? Like you publish something and it's up to date for a second, but you look like 2 hours later and it's out of date. So I think that's the $1 million question. Like, how do I do something and then 2 hours later someone, and I'm talking in hours because in some industries things change in a matter of hours. I think when you publish content, and it depends on the type of content, and I'm happy to have an offline conversation about this, I look for things that are probably patterns that maybe is important, but you see like a common thread that isn't as temporal. So I know I didn't do a very good job explaining that. I work on the Adweek Council, and so I've been through their process to see how they vet articles and content. What they do is they basically look at, so here's a story, is that good just now? And it may be temporally based. Will that have future implications? So let's say in travel, things are changing constantly, right? Like how airlines are changing protocols, what consumers think they're going to do about summer travel. I've seen recent studies, and again, they change, that show people are thinking about engaging in summer travel. I think if you're clear that this is a now piece, but here's something interesting that we have, people will still like it. I always, just like the survey data I shared with you was in late March, as long as you sort of ground it that this was temporal, but here's a cool insight I found, I think people will still find it relevant. I don't know if I answered your question or if I can elaborate more. Another question I got was, how do you set email alerts to see where your business is mentioned? So I'll go back up. They're called Google Alerts. So I'm not saying this to be funny. If you Google Alerts, it'll come up and you can put in the key phrases that you want on your business. It's interesting. I have Google Alerts set up about Southwestern University. I work there. I like to see what people say about it, and it'll pull. So because Google is a search engine, it pulls from media sources, blogs, like all kinds of sources. So even if someone's talking about me on their own blog, like I want to know, Southwestern isn't me, but it's interesting for me to see. It gives you what I would call a social listening insight. So there's companies that sell analytics that let you listen to what the sentiment is about your business. Google Alerts is a very rough way to kind of figure out who's talking about you and doing your business. If any of you have questions, I should have put my email on here. I'm also happy to talk to you privately about different things you can do. Other questions?
You could just put your email in a chat box for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I will do that. And I can actually stop the share right now and just answer questions.
So any other questions for anybody? Stick them in the chat box or unmute yourself.
Sorry, I know it's a lot of
That was really a great presentation, Dr. Sihi. Thank you so very much. I think there's a lot of takeaways for everybody on this meeting, virtual meeting. We do have a quick announcement, spotlight from Dr. Wynn. Dr. Wynn, are you still on? Can you unmute yourself? And
yes, I'm here. All right.
How are you?
I'm doing good. Well, thank you for having me on. My name is Dr. Wing of Ogden Health Direct Primary Care. I want to say that, with COVID-19 being uninsured for whatever reason doesn't mean that you cannot be cared for. We are a team of family doctors here in Georgetown offering a direct primary care membership program with a limited and personalized primary care services. No insurance is ever needed. You don't have to worry about any copays and any deductibles again for just once a month. Just like the way you do Netflix and your cell phones and your mortgage and your car payment. You need any lab work, x-rays, or prescriptions, we have it covered for you at wholesale pricing. Prescription is $2, lab work is $5. If we can help, let us know. Dr. Wing of Ogden Health Direct Primary Care, that's Ochna, O-C-H-N-A Health. That's in Oscar, Charlie, Hotel, November, Alpha Health. And we can help, let us know. I'll put my email and website there on the chat box. And thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Wynn. Be sure if you want to connect with Dr. Wynn that you reach out. And if you are interested in connecting with Dr. Sihi, I see lots of emails getting in there. Allison, will you make sure that everybody that's on the Lunch and Learn today gets an email as well, in case somebody had to jump off early or didn't get a chance to put their email in?
Yes, we'll be sending out a recording of the presentation along with the slides for anybody who had to leave early or miss today's presentation.
Oh, outstanding. Thank you guys for all you do at the chamber. Well, Steve, there's one thing left. Do you want to?
Sure. We need to invite our great friend and leader, fearless leader, Jim Johnson. Hopefully you can give us some good information on the way forward.
No, I can try. Thanks everybody for being here. Dr. Sihi, pleasure to have you, get to see you virtually. Thanks for all you're doing at Southwestern University. Anthony, thank you to Cedar Crest sponsoring today's luncheon. And then Dr. Wynn, thanks for taking advantage of one of those 30-second spotlights that you can add during these virtual events. So at the very beginning, Allison was asked about briefly, and I can't remember if it was the main group or what about the chamber returning to normal events. Right now, the situation is they're not allowed, unless it's a wedding, a funeral, or a church service. In-person events aren't taking place. We're expecting an announcement on June 3rd, and hopefully then we will provide more information back out to our members. I will let you guys know that we understand that some people aren't comfortable going to in-person events. The chamber will make all the necessary precautions, but we will continue to offer Zoom capabilities for the immediate future for those who want to take advantage of still hearing great presentations like Dr. Sihi, but can't get away from their busy medical practice or from Belton. We want to make sure you guys are still able to get that great content. So that's where we're working on. The chamber team we have not opened up our offices yet to visitors. Some appointments for the event center will take place, but we will slowly continue to reopen and get as close back as long as we're following the governor's orders. Two things I wanted to mention, that's kind of a good segue, is there's some questions about going back to work. So our next Chamber University will take place on June 4th at 10 a.m. The Fowler Law Firm will once again, you remember at the very beginning, it's like, what do I do when I'm shut down? And now it's, I want to go back, and what from a legal side can you do? And I think the Fowler firm and Laura Fowler will continue to provide relevant information back out to our members. And then for those who took advantage of the PPP program, Great program that the was put out there by the SB or the U.S. government through the CARES Act. But the forgiveness side of it, they just released information last week. And so on June 9th at 3 p.m., we'll be doing a free seminar for PPP forgiveness. The vice president, I think he was just on CNN last night with the U.S. Chamber, will be presenting information and kind of walking us through that process, as well as information on pending action with phase 4. So that's June 9th, 3 p.m. free. The event on June 4th is a $5 fee. So some good programs on the horizon. We'll still have breakfast links and lunch and learn. Cybersecurity will be our lunch and learn topic in June. I think I took Stephen Katz Thunder on that. Breakfast links will be County Judge Gravel. So good programs as we go through the next 30 days.
Kat, you got anything to say?
No, I just will leave you with this final parting thought from me, as I came across this quote earlier, and it said, make today so awesome that yesterday gets jealous. So I hope everybody has a great Wednesday and sign up for the upcoming events, and we look forward to seeing everybody next month. So thanks for joining us for Lunch and Learn.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks.